Welcome to Oxford Analytica's weekly video briefing. I'm Senior Middle East Analyst Alison Baily, and today we'll be talking about the impact the US shale gas revolution will have on energy exporters in the Middle East. To help us look at this subject in more detail, I'm delighted to welcome our Middle East energy expert, Justin Dargin. Justin, there are many concerns in the Gulf states about the US shale gas revolution and the impact this will have on their own energy outlook. Can you give us an idea of how this is going to affect the Middle East energy exporters in general?
Well, basically, shale gas will have several potential impacts on natural gas-rich Middle Eastern countries, and they're not all negative either. So if we take a nuanced view, for instance, we can see that on one hand, for Middle Eastern countries that are experiencing very high gas consumption rates, demand rates, that potentially this would be quite helpful or beneficial for them in the mid to long term. And the reason why is because once American shale gas enters into the overall LNG global market, then that would exert a downward pressure on LNG prices and thereby make let's say this market much more price competitive, which would end up being for the benefit or for the advantage, let's say, of many of the Middle Eastern countries that are in need of gas and are experiencing gas deficits at the moment. And we can see that there's an overall trend for countries that are gas rich, but their demand rates are increasing quite significantly, and they're turning to the LNG market. So that's one potential impact, which would be beneficial. Although for Middle Eastern countries that export LNG, then potentially this would be negative simply because of increased competition, of course. But I think that in reality, this would only be of concern to Qatar because the rest of the Middle Eastern countries, really, if we focus on the Gulf, so such as Oman and the UAE that export LNG, by the end of this decade, they're going to cease their exports and actually divert this natural gas supply to the internal market once the contracts expire by the end of this decade. So that's not really such a concern for them. Although if we look at another potential benefit, and that would be the spread of shale gas extraction technology or production technology. And this would be able to assist many of the MENA countries which have complex natural gas reservoirs that need to increase their own natural gas supply. So the spread of this American technology to their jurisdictions would actually have a beneficial impact in terms of allowing them to be able to deploy this advanced technology to increase their own production rates. Lastly, and I think perhaps most importantly, is the impact that would have on their long-term diversification efforts. And I think this is the main issue, and this is the issue that concerns many of the Gulf countries, and that is they've been investing billions of dollars into their downstream gas industries and into their petrochemical sectors and so on and so forth. And what we're beginning to witness is a relocation of international petrochemical firms from the Gulf to the United States. And they're doing this based on the fact that shale gas has contributed so much, nearly about 30% or so as we speak, to the U.S. natural gas supply, and it's expected that it would actually supply more, and the price has been going down for some time. And if we look overall, there have been about 110 petrochemical projects that have been announced with an overall capitalization of about $77 billion or so. So strategically, that's really what many of the Gulf countries are worried about, and this is a long-term threat to their overall industrialization and economic modernization plans.
So there are clearly a lot of benefits there then for the Middle East energy poor countries, but also some concerns, particularly then for the exporters. I mean, you mentioned this sort of transfer of technology and the exploitation of shale resources in the Middle East itself. I mean, what kind of impact will that have overall then on energy pricing regimes in the region?
Well, what we're noticing is that many of the countries that have in the Middle East that have the highest demand rates and that are currently experiencing gas deficits actually have a significant amount of natural gas. It's not that they're gas poor per se, it's that they actually have a lot of gas, but they just simply have not been able to exploit it enough to be able to contribute to their overall production. Most of the natural gas production in the Gulf, if we use that as an example, is from associated natural gas. And associated natural gas, as we know, is the natural gas that's produced alongside your oil production. And that's fairly easy and it's not that complicated. Although, if we look at right now, most of the Gulf countries, they have more or less maximized their associated natural gas production, and now they need to turn to their non-associated gas production, their non-associated gas reservoirs. And most of these reservoirs are quite complex, actually. Some of them are quite sour, which means that they have fairly high rates of sulfur. Some are tight, that means it's locked within crevices of sandstone or lime or what have you. And there's also some shale gas as well in the Arabian Peninsula. So this requires a certain amount of advanced technology to be able to unlock, but the price of production, or the cost of production rather, is actually much higher than producing from associated natural gas. So as a result, if we look at the natural gas pricing regimes that are in place at the moment, it's going to have to change. It's going to have to evolve if the countries are going to be able to expedite production of these non-associated complex natural gas reservoirs. And it's coming under pressure. This natural gas regime is coming under pressure at the moment. One of the first transitions that we've seen is Oman, and they have increased their natural gas pricing regime domestically, and it's going to spread throughout the region because simply the status quo is not able to remain in place. So we're going to see some change, and I would hazard a guess to say within the next 5 to 6 years or so.
So which other countries then are really preparing themselves for this revolution and for these very radical changes? Mm-hmm. Do we really have a sense of a clear strategy coming out particularly from the Gulf exporters?
Well, the thing is, this is a phenomenon that many countries do not want to face, actually. So it's really, how can I say, just a type of last effort in order to try to forestall, let's say, demand outpacing production to such an extent that their economies would collapse. I mean, to be frank about it, and that their industrialization would grind to a halt. So if we look at the long-term diversification strategies. So raising prices is actually the last item on the menu. So what we're noticing is that many of the countries are engaging in other steps. They're investing in renewable energy, nuclear energy, for instance, energy efficiency, and they're diverting gas from export projects to the internal market and things of that nature, and also to a certain degree using heavy fuel oil as well for power gen and so on. So the reality is that price change or pricing reformation has to occur, but it's actually something that many countries are attempting to forestall as long as possible. But there is the recognition nonetheless that it's going to have to occur. The reason why, just briefly, that many of the Gulf countries do not want to undertake that step is that their entire industrialization strategy is predicated upon the low-cost natural gas molecule, the natural gas input going to the domestic industrial market. So that's really the main focus, and they feel that their comparative advantage, shall we say, would be hindered significantly if they were to increase prices. And the thing is, the Gulf countries are attempting to capture as much market share as possible at the moment. So right now it's about 15% of the global market, the global petrochemical market, and they feel that if prices increase domestically, then they would lose their competitive edge, and as a result, their industrialization strategy, which again is predicated on the downstream natural gas industries, would grind to a halt under the onslaught of American petrochemical growth and potential Chinese petrochemical growth as well. And then you have two facets with that. On one hand, you have that two large markets for petrochemicals would thereby be off, limits to, let's say, Gulf petrochemical exports, if U.S. and also Chinese petrochemical development really picks up steam. And then also you have potential competition in the global market, the global petrochemical market as well.
And of course, the Middle East at the moment is facing a number of very sort of serious political changes and upheavals. What kind of political obstacles are there that really could sort of get in the way of the region adapting as quickly as it could and should to these very different changes on the energy scene?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's principally an issue of the notion in many of the energy-rich countries of what is the social contract. So their social contract more or less entails that the populace will have access to extremely low-cost energy and power as well, so electricity. So that is part of the social contract, and this goes back to the notion that the energy reserves, so the hydrocarbon reserves in the country, are actually the patrimony of the people, and that the government is only holding it in trust for them. So it's only administering, let's say, the hydrocarbon resources, but ultimately the true owner of it is the people, not the government. And that's more or less the idea. So the notion of liberalizing, let's say, power tariffs and natural gas prices is anathema to many in the region, and particularly in this time which is fraught with socio-political instability across the region, many governments are quite hesitant, shall we say, to take that step to upset the status quo, particularly at this sensitive time. So increasing prices in any way, shape, or form, many governments and policymakers in the region feel would set their countries aflame to a certain degree. But also we have to realize that if steps are not undertaken in order to deal with this very serious problem in terms of energy allocation and production at sufficient rates and so on, then long-term job creation is also at risk. And this is also a threat, because one thing that we've learned from the Arab Spring is that with this demographic boom that is occurring at the moment, you have to have enough jobs for the young people, for many people that are graduating from college, that the public sector will not necessarily be able to absorb them going forward. So you want to build up a dynamic economy whereby the private sector undertakes a much larger role in providing jobs. But at the same time, at least in the short term, many governments are afraid of this very sensitive period. If you upset the status quo, then it could cause some very serious social-political unrest.
So in summary, the Middle East really faces some very serious political risks and some very positive economic opportunities from the US shale gas revolution. Justin, thanks very much.
Thank you, Alison,
for your insights. We'll be keeping a very close eye on this issue and other issues of relevance to the political economy in the Middle East through our regular coverage in our flagship analysis publication, The Daily Brief. If you'd like more information, please take a look at our website. But for now, from Oxford, thank you for joining us and goodbye.